English Politics Podcast.
English Politics Podcast.
English Politics Podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the English Politics Podcast, where we explore political strategies, insider stories, and some of the most pressing issues in today's world. I'm your host, Jessica Williams, and I'm thrilled to be with you today. If this is your first time listening, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay up to date with the latest episodes and insights. Today, we have something truly special. We're diving deep into the secret plans that shaped one of the most controversial and transformative presidencies in American history, Donald J. Trump. In this episode, we're going to discuss 10 secret plans from his presidency that remained behind the scenes but had a significant impact on the U.S. and the world. These plans weren't always public knowledge, and we're here to unpack them and give you an inside look into the strategic thinking of the Trump administration. We're honored to welcome the 45th President of the United States himself, Donald James Trump, back to the podcast. Mr. President, thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here, Jessica. Always a pleasure. These secret plans were crucial to America's success, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk about them. Let's dive into it.
Absolutely. There's so much to unpack here. You made waves during your presidency, often keeping the world guessing with your strategies. Today, we'll look behind the curtain at some of your most impactful decisions that weren't immediately visible to the public. So let's get started. Mr. President, one of the most talked about aspects of your presidency was your America First policy. Can you explain how this approach shaped your foreign policy, and what were the key secret plans behind it?
The America First policy was a strategy aimed at reprioritizing America's needs over international commitments that often didn't serve our best interests. The key secret plan was to reevaluate all international agreements and treaties to ensure they were fair to the U.S. and beneficial for American workers. One of the biggest actions under this policy was the renegotiation of trade deals like NAFTA, which became the USMCA. The America First approach also led to reducing military deployments overseas and focusing on making the U.S. economy more self-sufficient. This meant withdrawing from global accords, such as the Paris Climate Agreement, which we felt placed an unfair burden on American industry. Additionally, it included economic isolationism, like tariffs on foreign products to protect American manufacturing, and reasserting U.S. strength on the world stage.
During your time in office, you made significant changes in U.S. policy in the Middle East, particularly with Iran. Could you elaborate on the secret strategies you had in place to deal with this long-standing issue?
Iran posed a unique threat not just to the U.S., but to global stability. The secret strategy was to apply maximum pressure on Iran, both economically and politically, to change its behavior. First, I withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, which I believe was fundamentally flawed and gave Iran too much leeway. Then, we implemented a maximum pressure campaign that involved heavy sanctions targeting Iran's oil exports and its key financial institutions. This tactic crippled Iran's economy and put them in a position where they had to choose between continuing their nuclear pursuits or negotiating for relief. We also strengthened ties with our Middle Eastern allies, like Israel and Saudi Arabia, to present a united front against Iran's aggression. The goal was not just to deter Iran's nuclear ambitions, but to change their entire approach to diplomacy and regional influence.
Another key area was your approach to immigration. You advocated for stricter immigration policies throughout your presidency. What were the strategic plans behind the changes you made in this area?
Immigration was one of the most controversial issues of my presidency, but it was crucial to the future security and prosperity of the United States. The secret plan here involved not just enforcing border security, but also reshaping immigration policies to protect American jobs and safety. The construction of the border wall was a critical component. It wasn't just about a physical barrier. It was part of a broader strategy to reduce illegal immigration and human trafficking. Another significant aspect was the implementation of the Remain in Mexico policy, which required asylum seekers to stay in Mexico while their claims were processed, reducing the strain on U.S. border facilities. Additionally, we focused on limiting chain migration and ending the diversity visa lottery, which allowed people to enter the country randomly. These changes were intended to prioritize immigrants who could contribute to our economy and integrate into American society, ensuring our immigration system was merit-based.
Finally, Mr. President, you're known for your bold foreign policy moves. What was the secret plan behind your approach to China, particularly during the trade war?
The secret plan behind our approach to China was simple: to confront their unfair trade practices head-on and ensure that China adhered to the global economic rules that we had set. For years, China had been taking advantage of trade imbalances, intellectual property theft, and forced technology transfers, all of which hurt American businesses. The trade war was a tactical move to level the playing field. The plan was to impose tariffs on Chinese goods to force China into negotiations that would result in a more equitable trade agreement. At the same time, we worked with our allies to create a unified front against China's economic and technological practices. While the media often focus on the immediate impacts of tariffs, the long-term goal was to establish fairer trade relations, protect American intellectual property, and end China's unfair practices that hurt U.S. workers and companies.
The Hidden Strategies of a Presidency, a journey behind Trump's 10 secret plans. It was a cold winter morning in Washington, D.C., and the streets were quieter than usual. Inside the iconic White House, a secret meeting was taking place. A few select aides and top advisors gathered in a secure, undisclosed room. Among them was President Donald Trump, who was about to unveil some of the most strategic and secretive plans from his presidency, plans that had never been fully revealed to the public. Trump, a man known for his boldness, had always kept a few cards up his sleeve during his time in office. These 10 plans were among the most closely guarded secrets, but now the president had decided it was time to disclose them. His intent was to set the record straight and show the world the full extent of his strategic thinking. His advisors, skeptical of some of these plans, were unaware of what would come next. As the meeting commenced, the president, with his trademark confidence, began speaking. Some of these strategies have been in the works for years, Trump began, leaning forward, a twinkle in his eye. Others came to me during moments of chaos, when the world needed leadership. All of them have one thing in common: they were never meant to be shared, at least not until now. Plan 1. The ultimate Middle East peace deal. One of the most discussed, yet least understood, of Trump's plans was his vision for peace in the Middle East. While the public was focused on the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and the complicated negotiations with Iran, Trump had quietly brokered a deal that sought to reshape the entire region. It wasn't just about politics, it was about power. He'd worked in secret to forge alliances between Israel, the Gulf states, and other Middle Eastern countries, bypassing traditional diplomatic channels. It wasn't just about cutting deals. It was about creating a system where these nations could no longer afford to ignore each other, Trump explained. I knew that if I could get them all to agree on a common purpose, like the fight against terrorism or economic cooperation, the whole region would shift in a way they didn't expect. This plan was monumental, even though it went under the radar. It resulted in the Abraham Accords, a series of normalization agreements between Israel and Arab nations. But behind the scenes, the details were far more intricate, with covert negotiations and secret meetings that would never be publicly acknowledged. Plan 2. The economic power play. Next, Trump shared one of his most secretive strategies: economic pressure as a tool for global influence. While many knew about the trade wars, especially with China, few understood the depth of the economic strategies Trump had in place. He'd leveraged tariffs, sanctions, and trade deals to force global powers to the table, often using unorthodox methods to gain the upper hand. Trade is war without bullets, Trump remarked, his tone serious. When you control the purse strings, you control the game. That's why we hit China with tariffs, but also why I wanted to bring jobs back to America. The whole world is playing chess, and I was ready to make moves no one saw coming. Under this economic strategy, Trump secured a range of agreements from countries that were once adversaries, forcing them into negotiations that were beneficial to the U.S. economy. His approach wasn't just about protecting American jobs. It was about reshaping global supply chains, ensuring that the U.S. maintained a dominant position in the world economy. Plan 3. The Secret War on Cybersecurity. While the world watched the media storm surrounding Russia's cyber activities, Trump was secretly orchestrating a major offensive against global cyber threats. His administration had invested heavily in cybersecurity, yet most of the work went unnoticed by the public. Trump's plan was to build a robust defense system that could protect U.S. infrastructure while simultaneously launching cyber attacks on foreign adversaries. "We couldn't just wait for the next attack," Trump said. "We needed to take the fight to them before they took it to us." And we did. Behind the scenes, the U.S. government was engaged in cyber warfare against adversaries like Russia and China. The Department of Defense had covert operations that aimed to disable foreign networks and protect American infrastructure from being crippled by unseen digital attacks. Plan 4. Strengthening America's global military presence. Many criticized Trump's isolationist tendencies, but few understood that his actions were part of a larger strategy to reassert American strength in the global military arena. Trump had worked to rebuild the U.S. military by pushing NATO allies to increase their defense spending and restructuring U.S. military presence in key regions. "It was never about pulling back. It was about forcing others to step up," Trump said. "America has always carried the burden of global defense, but I knew we had to make our allies take more responsibility." Trump's military strategy included modernizing the U.S. armed forces, enhancing cyber warfare capabilities, and securing critical defense agreements with countries like Japan, South Korea, and Eastern European nations. He believed that if the U.S. could shift the defense burden, it would be able to focus on new threats, like cyber and space warfare, while maintaining an unshakable military presence globally. Plan 5. The Border and Immigration Strategy. One of Trump's most publicized policies was his stance on immigration and border security, but what most people didn't know was the level of planning that went into it. Trump had envisioned a multifaceted strategy to stop illegal immigration, overhaul the asylum system, and ensure that immigration laws were enforced to their fullest extent. "We needed to make sure that America's borders were secure," Trump said. But the wall wasn't just a symbol. It was part of a much larger strategy to control illegal entry and prevent human trafficking. And it worked. Alongside the physical barriers, the Trump administration focused on cracking down on immigration fraud and strengthening the legal immigration system. These measures were seen by many as controversial, but Trump argued that they were necessary for the security and integrity of the country. Plan 6. Climate change and energy independence. Though often criticized for his stance on climate change, Trump had a more nuanced plan in mind. Behind closed doors, he had pushed for a balance between energy independence and environmental responsibility. His administration worked on advancing clean energy initiatives while ensuring that the U.S. remained the world's leading energy producer. "I've always believed in the power of American innovation," Trump said. "We didn't need to choose between a clean environment and economic prosperity. We could have both." This approach led to significant growth in the U.S. energy sector, particularly in natural gas production. Trump also initiated programs to fund climate adaptation measures, focusing on infrastructure resilience in the face of climate events while keeping energy prices competitive. Plan 7. The Judiciary Overhaul. Another secretive aspect of Trump's presidency was his strategic reshaping of the U.S. judiciary. Trump had quietly pushed to appoint conservative judges to federal courts, knowing that these appointments would have a lasting impact for generations to come. "I've always believed in the Constitution and the rule of law," Trump said. "And I knew the courts had to reflect those values if we were going to protect freedom." The appointments included 3 Supreme Court justices, reshaping the ideological balance of the court, along with dozens of federal judges. This reshaping of the judiciary was one of the most impactful, but least recognized, strategies of his presidency. Conclusion. As President Trump concluded his unveiling of these 10 secret plans, it became clear that his administration had been far more complex and far-reaching than the public had ever known. Behind the headlines and media battles, Trump had been quietly implementing a series of strategies designed to reshape America's future, protect its interests, and assert its dominance on the global stage. "Sometimes the best plans are the ones you don't talk about," Trump said with a grin. But now it's time for the world to know the full story. The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled in. These 10 secret plans were the foundation of a presidency that had been marked by controversy, ambition, and, above all, relentless pursuit of American power.
That wraps up today's episode of English Politics Podcast. Mr. President, thank you for sharing your insights with us. It's been an enlightening discussion on some of the secret plans that shaped your presidency. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. We're here every day bringing you political insights and discussions. Don't miss out on the latest episodes. We'll be back tomorrow with more exciting content. Keep following us and stay engaged in the conversation.
Thanks for having me, Jessica. It's been great to be here and share these plans with your audience. Stay tuned, folks. There's more coming.